Welcome everyone. So good to see you and be with you. Um, I was gonna ask Margaret, would you mind opening us in prayer this evening? If you're talking, you're muted. Oh, oh, let me see.
Okay,
Oh,
there I go. Okay, thank you. Our dear Heavenly Creator, thank you for life, for redemption, for your sustaining power every day. Um, we come many from very busy days today and this week, and we ask that you would help us to relax and focus on the important work that we're doing and to be able to stay mindful and intentional and ask that your spirit would be with us and help us to do your will, especially as it relates to racial reconciliation. Help us to make a difference in our world. And we thank you for those that have given such strong and good leadership to this project. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
amen.
Man.
Thank you. Yes, we're really grateful to be together this evening. I I've been just in full transparency, I've had some family matters that have come up. We had a death in my family, so
Oh,
I
I'm
am
sorry.
really glad to be with you all. But I will be leaning heavily on Shauna's leading
Mhm.
this evening. Very thankful for her partnership and yeah, but I knew that I wanted to be with you all since we only get to gather like this once a month. So I just appreciate your grace. I'm gonna give like a quick overview of our session and then we'll move into our shuffle and share. We'll do that first. And then we're gonna spend a little bit of time on like a summit check-in. So we have time for like Q&A about the summit coming up in a little over 2 months, just about 2 months. We will also have some time for y'all to those who haven't yet to register. I did put this in the email, but even if you know you're not coming, there's still a spot on the registration form to indicate that you're not able to come. So that will help us just to keep track of everybody. And then the bulk of the session tonight will be moving into this visioning phase of the program. We really want to start like building the vision of what we're working toward collectively in terms of narrative change and what we really want to see happen in our churches and communities. So we're building on what you've shared last session, what you've done in your congregations, and then this is going to move us through to October and then into the November summit and beyond. Um, so for the shuffle and share question, I want us to think about, and then we'll have these mixed breakout groups, but I want us to think about this question. If you discovered a beautiful island where you could build a new society, what would be the first rule you would establish? What would be the first rule you would establish? And I think for me, Um, I think at this moment, what's coming to mind, the rule would be like, be kind. Be kind. I think, especially since I've moved to the South, I've gained a new appreciation for kindness. But I think that would be the first rule. But hopefully y'all can kind of give it some seconds to think about it. And then in the small groups, you'll get to talk to each other. And then we'll come back as a big group, and if anyone wants to share out, they can. Um, yeah. So the groups, they ready, Shauna?
They're ready.
Okay. Um,
I'll go ahead
so
and
yep. Does everyone see their groups? No? Yes? Okay.
All men and women are created equal.
I like that.
We talked about accountability to each other and to each, to our well-being and survival.
Mm,
Nobody left out. Accountability for all, commitment to everybody's well-being.
Mhm.
love that.
We talked about that it's very difficult because as soon as you make a rule, who oversees that rule, how, you know, you tend to, it may tend to get like the Pharisees in the New Testament, where their
Right.
intentions were so very good to follow the commandments, and yet they kept having to make up more rules to say, well, if everyone is to be treated kindly, what is kind? You know, were
Right.
you being kind? And so it's a real challenge, but I think we had some of the same thoughts of kindness and doing love each other. Um, Pamela, how did you state that? Uh, love one another.
love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah, that's what right. That was what she said. That's what Pamela said.
Yeah, we had that one too. We had oh, let me get this. I'm about to say it wrong. Uh Communion over competition, not communion. What was the word? Shalice?
Cooperation.
Cooperation.
Cooperation over competition. And no one will be overworked.
Oh.
And that's against the rules on our island. And people will be given the space to find the where their great passion meets the island's great need.
Hmm.
Right.
Kathy, I was sure you were going to say the only rule is that there will be no rules.
Well, I thought about the Quakers, and when my doing some study of the Quakers, I read one time that would they, as a body, they would not move forward on a decision or a direction until everyone was in agreement in the spirit.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that would be
That,
really neat. You just wait until everyone's in agreement.
that
Right.
is, unless someone chooses and offers to step aside, and allow, the otherwise consensus to move forward.
Yeah, yes, somebody. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any last shares? Any
Um,
last rules?
I mean, maybe this was, I don't know, reflection on the world currently, but it was sort of some of us in our group got a little kind of stuck because it felt like as soon as I thought of a rule that seemed good, I started going down the rabbit hole of all of the bad faith ways that could be interpreted, kind of like a love your neighbor. It's like, well, you see, me shaming you is how I'm showing my love because wouldn't I would want to be bettered, and all of these things, that kind of that will get used against people. And so I don't know, kind of immediately anticipating our utopian island not being utopian anymore.
Has there ever been a utopian society that ever lasted very long?
Yeah. Well, thank you all for sharing. We'll re-enter that sort of imaginative space in a little bit. Sean is going to lead us through some summit Q&A.
Hello, hello. Yes, and it was a nice way to start. And I actually kind of Rowan, what you shared at the end there about it getting complex and complicated is I think just really in line with a lot of the things we've been talking about overall and the topics we've been trying to deal with. So it's kind of a great frame for the conversations we'll continue to have this evening. But before we jump in, we just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to touch base around the summit itself that's coming up. I'll go ahead and just briefly share my screen, but it's just our main page. There we go. And just as a reminder, Emily mentioned it at the top of the hour when we all started, but September the 15th, so next week, I believe that is when we would like to get the registrations in. So that does not mean that a plane ticket has to be purchased yet, does not mean the room has to be booked yet. Those dates are later and they're all on the site. But the registration is what allows us to have a good working head count so we can think about things like meals, and we're working with caterers and things like that. We're doing room arrangements and setups. And so it gives us, it really helps us to be able to kind of finalize those details.
Shauna, can you make that bigger? I cannot read it.
Did that help at all?
A little bit. That's better.
So yes, that's our first upcoming deadline is the registration itself. And that just means completing the registration form that is linked on the page. And then we can send it again through email, and I'm going to drop this link in the chat right now, just in case. And on this actual page is the registration link. If anyone is coming with you, that will participate. If you have a partner or friend coming with you that will just kind of be hanging out in town, sharing the hotel room, that type, we don't really need to know about that head count. But if you're bringing someone with you that will participate in activities that we want to make sure we have a chair for, we want to make sure we have a plate for them, that type of a companion, please have them also complete a separate registration form from your own. It asks about food allergies and mobility and that type of thing. So we want everybody to fill out their own so that we know about any special accommodations that we need to have, and also so that we know that one registration per head. So again, that's for anyone in your churches are welcome. The travel support is only for the committee members, but anyone from any of your churches is welcome. We just ask that they please complete that registration form so that we'll have everything that we need for them. So, any questions about that specifically right at this moment? And then, as Emily also mentioned, there is a place to say no, you are not attending. So we are asking that every cohort member please complete the registration and just check no. It's the first question. So once you hit no, it's not going to make you fill out everything else. It's just going to say thank you. But that way it lets us know that you are not coming when we see you. So we're not following up, as opposed to thinking that maybe you didn't get a chance yet to fill it out. So
Shauna, may I make a request,
yeah.
please? I get lots of these and I often think I've registered. Maybe I have and maybe I haven't. Could you guys send us who has registered from our congregation in the next few days so that we can follow up appropriately with folks who haven't responded one way or the other?
And we'll go, most of you have in terms of your individual selves. So the few of you that are committee members that have not, will reach out to you individually over the next week, just to confirm whether or not you're coming.
Just so you know, that's not readable either.
Oh yeah, and I actually wasn't trying to share that, so thank you. I forgot my screen was sharing. But But most of you have. So this reminder is mostly around, there's just a couple of you that haven't. We'll reach out individually to you. Um, but also if you have shared this or you think you know of anyone in the congregation that has shared with you that they would also like to come and they're not a committee member and we have no relation to them, so they wouldn't get any reminders from us. Or if you are planning to bring anyone with you that you want to participate in the um, activities and that we want to that we would want to make sure that we're prepared for. And there is a caveat to that. When if they're not members kind of your church congregations, then they would be more than welcome to participate in the public elements, their dinners, and we'll note those on the itinerary. There are some planning sessions that are specifically for members of the churches that are in the cohort. So if you bring someone with you to attend and they're not affiliated with your church, but and they're certainly welcome to come to some of the things, but we wouldn't necessarily want them in that planning segment because it's just very specific to the work you all are doing, if that makes sense.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are we supposed to be making a reservation for a hotel room for just ourselves, or should we be rooming with other members of our church who are on this committee, or do we each get our own separate room?
You each get your own room, and then the cost of that room for each of you will be reimbursed.
Okay.
We
But
do
if
know
we wanted to have a room together, we could do that.
yeah, you're welcome to do that if you want to.
Okay.
But in
So
terms of
you all aren't going to be like telling us to hook up with each other and share a room unless
no,
we want to.
right. Each of you has a dedicated support for a room and for your travel based on the terms listed there. Now, we do know that sometimes, if you might be bringing a partner or family member or friend that might
Right,
want to
right.
share a room with you, but there's one room per committee member that has been allocated.
Okay, thank you.
Shauna, I will offer a guest room if somebody wishes to stay at my house. Either from this group or from others in their congregation who might not otherwise be able to make it.
Thank you.
That's so very kind. Thank you for that. So those are the specifics around, well, so September 15th is the registration itself, just to get us the head count. October 13th is the last day of the discounted rate for the hotel block. So you don't necessarily have to book your hotel by that date. People can still book up until the day before as long as there are rooms available, but the discounted price is only until October 13th, and that is the reimbursement price. So if you do book later and they have raised the price, we will still reimburse you for the discounted price that's valid through October 13th. And then after the summit, after everyone has come and participated, then that's when we'll ask you to submit your receipts by December 1st so we can get those reimbursements out to you for your travel and for your hotel payments.
Donna, I'm gonna make another offer, and that is if others from the congregations in Dallas and Raleigh are interested in coming and would prefer not to have to pay for a place. If y'all get me that information, I'll see if I can find places for people to stay, not too far from our church, which is where the sessions will be.
That's really kind, Becky.
Yeah, thank you.
The reimbursement will cancel out any lodging payment. So just so people are aware, certainly if you have other preferences, but we've done a lot of work to establish these connections and arrange these accommodations. So and we've calculated the reimbursements based on what they are. So if anyone has any issues or anything, please definitely do let us know. We don't want expense or cost to keep any of our cohort members from participating. So please just reach out to me and Shauna. And if there's alternative arrangements that can be made, we definitely can help make connections with that.
Are all the meals being covered, or are we responsible for some of our meals?
Most of the meals will be covered. We're finalizing that now. There might be a lunch or a final, or not a final. I don't think dinner. There might be a lunch that you will be responsible for. We're looking into that now. Some of it just has
Okay.
to do with some logistics and where we'll be and how it all works out. But the majority of the meals will be covered. Breakfast for well, I guess I should phrase it this way. So for breakfast for anyone that's staying in a hotel, the hotel has breakfast as part of that.
Okay.
And then we will have some dinner events on the Thursday and the Friday. Yeah, dinner is covered. So there's a possibility of maybe a lunch that you might cover.
Okay.
But other than that, we will take care of the food. And we'll be updating. We've got a lot of new updates, exciting updates on the itinerary. So we'll be updating that actual web page this week with some of the new details. So really excited about that. But we think you'll enjoy a lot of that. I think Emily, you shared some information about Dr. Jones. And so we'll have Dr. Robbie Jones with us on Friday night, which we're really excited about. He's an amazing man. We've done a lot of work with him before. You all will finally get a chance to meet Jay and Joey in person and hear from them. And then some other really great people that we think you'll enjoy hearing from. So we'll start being able to sprinkle that in on the itinerary page on the website. We've just been kind of finalizing the actual times and spaces and that type of thing.
And I will say, I'm not sure, Shauna probably already said this, but if you haven't yet registered, or for the people who have, once you submit that form, then we send you the information to make the hotel reservation. So, like if you're looking for the hotel link and how to make that reservation and you haven't yet filled out the form, then you don't have access to it. So it's just a way for us to keep track of who has actually registered and who we've sent the hotel information to. So if you have registered and you didn't receive that or you've misplaced it, please just let me or Shauna know and we'll happily just send it again.
All right. Well, if there are no burning, pressing questions for that piece, then we'll go ahead and shift to the next part of the session. So what we're really looking at, and as we kind of come to the summit, come to the conclusion of this phase of our work together, we've been together a long time, y'all. It's been a good minute, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you to all of you for just your dedication, sticking with this. We know that you have so many places you could be, so many other things you could be doing. And so it really means a lot to us for you to have
Shauna,
this.
sorry, Shauna, you're still sharing.
Oh, I'll stop sharing. Thank you. I forgot. But so yeah, we're really excited. So we have this session, then we have our October session, and then we're at the summit. Kind of celebrating the wrap up. So the wrap up of this phase of the work, you all are planning for your next phases, and we want to continue to support all of that. So one of the things that looks like as we start looking toward the summit, and one of the shifts kind of in our conversation that will begin tonight, is starting to think about, with everything that you're planning. You all have done all of this learning, you've done all these conversations with your congregation, and a lot of this for many of you is in addition to other things your church has already been doing. So starting to think about, what is the collective power of all of this individual work that's being done? And how do we leverage that? How do we go about seeing making space to figure out and to understand how all of these things that we're doing together are actually making some of the changes we want to see? And so we'll be tackling, that'll be one of the main questions that we're tackling at the summit, is starting to think about, as you leave kind of this cohort phase, which was really focused on deep internal work at the individual churches, moving into a space after that where all of these plans that you all have and the ongoing work you'll be doing, we can actually share with each other in a way that measures what is progress that we're making towards the things that we find important and towards the way that we would define success of doing this work. So we're starting that conversation tonight and kind of starting the idea of thinking about what does that look like and what does success mean to us. So we're going to have a couple of different breakout activities to get that going. So for this first one, it's going to be a brainstorming, and let us get you all set up. And so there'll be 3 groups. Oops. Sorry, I'm just gonna recreate. There we go. So you've got 3 groups now. Each of you has your first question prompt that you'll be sharing. So I'm going to drop this in the chat. And then I'll call out to you what your groups are. So you will know where to look. Ooh, Zoom updated and everything looks a little bit different right now. Okay, there we go. So group 1 is Kathy Randalls, Mary, Rowan, Sean, Shelby. And that's group 1. So you'll click on that group 1 link to get to your sheet. And again, that's Kathy Randalls, Mary, Rowan, Sean, Shelby. Room 2, group 2 is Abby, Shalise, Juliana, Lewis, and Margaret. That's group 2. And group 3, Becky, Kathy, Tamsberg, Chris, and Pamela. All right. So I'm just going to send you into your groups. Read your question, talk amongst yourselves. And actually, let's start with everyone go ahead and click on the link that pertains to you. And I'd like to spend just a moment with you having about a good 30 seconds to process it yourself before you go in and start talking on it. So everyone make sure that you can access that sheet and that you're not having any problem with that. And let me know if you do. And in just a moment, I'll send you into your breakout room, but I wanted to give everyone a second to observe and think. All right, I'm sending you to your rooms now. Think and reflect amongst yourselves and take your notes on this sheet, and then we'll have a group discussion about it in about 10, 15 minutes or so. I'm trying to read people's faces, but apparently I'm terrible at that because nothing's coming to me. Yeah, we did a random shuffle thinking I would be a little bit more mixed up, but Zoom was having other thoughts and plans. So maybe it was meant for you to be primarily with your church mates than for this question. All right. Everyone's trickling back in. I think we're about all in. Yeah, would just love to have a little bit of sharing from each group. Each of you had different questions, so would like to just maybe go around and the first group, share your question and share some of your thoughts around it, and then we'll just do that for each group. So let's start out with group one.
I was just looking at our Google document and realizing that we took almost no notes at all. That's the sum total of my report. Thank you.
But we had a lot of good discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll dive in and try to recap and y'all back me up. So Mary spoke first about pulling.
Let's start with your question too.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Y'all don't know the question. Wow. All right, we got a wild question, y'all. Can someone who's looking at it read the question? Because I'm having trouble
I've got it.
multitasking. Thank you.
Okay. In some distant point in the future, after all the hard work around race and equity has been extremely successful, and we've achieved everything we hoped for, an alien lands at the site of your church. Describe what that alien observes using as many senses as possible.
So we have at Pullen, both at Pullen and Wilshire in the near future, there will be a visible plaque that includes a land acknowledgement and acknowledgement of the first people that were present on the site and that stewarded that site. And at Pullen, there will be a more multicultural presence, both in the leadership and in the choir and in the congregation. And uh, and help me out, y'all. Help me.
Yeah, another thing is there will be many active partnerships in the community between Pullen and other anti-racist groups and groups that are predominantly people of color, partnering with them to help them with their aims.
Very nice.
We're hoping all of this happens well before the alien comes, but
Yeah.
When does the alien do? When is he going to be there?
We weren't given that information. It did say that it was in the distant future. So we were dreaming a little bit about at St. Charles in New Orleans that like taken it spoke about other senses as well. So we were talking about like aspiring towards a multicultural congregation and for that to be reflected in community meals that we might enjoy together, that there's food from the different cultures that are attending our church and musically that there's a an expanded palette of musical styles from the multiple cultures that are represented and attending our church, and that it flows regularly. That like one musical form isn't dominant. Yeah, more was said. Y'all help me out, and I don't know how much time we've got either. So.
And what I'll do, I'll wrap us up here and we'll shift to the next one. But we wanted to point out, so thank you for that. That was fantastic. We use kind of the approach of these particular prompts, and we're sharing them with you in case, as you all continue to work with your congregations, there might be a meeting where they might be useful for you with other members of the church to talk about things. And the idea is to kind of help people who might have a harder time of separating from the rigid reality to think in a different way. And I think some things to kind of highlight an alien in particular, right? If this is an alien, we didn't just say a person or it's a distant time in the future, but if it's an alien, it means that they might not know some of these things, right? So it requires you to describe You know, when you think about there'll be more partnerships, an alien doesn't know what a partnership is. So
Right.
what is an alien looking at? You know, they're looking at two beings that maybe look differently or maybe just came from two different places that seem to be doing things together. But just thinking about ways that you, as you all continue to plan and work with your congregation, to have them dig deeper and really have a vision, start to build some visioning. But great job. Group 2, what's your question and what did you all think about it?
In
Or
the
come up with?
year 2035, all of the hard work around race and equity has been extremely successful, and we've achieved everything we hoped for. Design a museum exhibit titled In Deed and Truth. What artifacts, quotes, or headlines in the exhibit prove the church's story changed? But we got to have physical evidence of this that you can put in a museum. And we decided that our timeline, which has become a real fixture, we got it posted twice. It's very beautiful. And Shelby did a great job. And, and people are leaving notes on it. I think it's a real symbol. And if we do, as I hope and many others hope, we have some kind of memorial that symbolizes the land acknowledgement, the four tribes that occupied our land, and then the fact that the land eventually, the natives were removed and plantations came in with enslaved people, and then eventually they faded. And then eventually Wilshire came to be.
We also talked about we're planning a service of lament, and one of the artifacts might be the worship folder from that service of lament, but that also maybe we will have started an annual service of lament, which is in line with prophets and Jesus' teachings.
Anything else you all want to share about your exhibit? All right.
Didn't we say a few more things? Somebody?
We
I
had
liked
a
what
discussion
Shalice.
about worship styles.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm the odd person here because I feel like I'm multi-churchal. I'm at home in about 10 different churches in our area. We went recently to the 110th anniversary for the oldest Black church in Garland. We went visited First Presbyterian the day the Cameroonians were in charge. I'm very comfortable going to the Catholic Church. Everybody worships differently, you know, I would hope at Wilshire we would see some other elements brought in. What the First Presbyterian does is they turn the offering over to the Cameroonians on one Sunday every month, and they dress in their native costumes and they carry the baskets around to collect the offering, and then they go to the front and they have this ceremony and they dance down the aisle and beating on their instruments. I mean, that's extreme probably for anything we
I would love that.
at Wilshire. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Get to go and watch that. But it, you know, and then the Black church we went to, I mean, the pastor was honing and toning, and they had dancers that, you know, I don't know what people would think of that. But beautiful, beautiful music. But it was, the choir was rolling and going. So, you know, there's so many different styles out there, and how you put it all together.
Yeah.
Abby, I think you were going to add something.
Oh, I just appreciated Shalise was started the conversation off on hoping to see worship services that looked different. And we talked about it, the desire to have more multi-ethnic congregations, which for many reasons may never come to fruition, but just hoping there would be evidence of us being a welcoming space, a truly safe and welcoming space.
Thank you all for that. And last but not least, we'll shift over to group 3. Share your question and your thoughts.
I'll read the question for group 3. In the year 2030, all of the hard work around race and equity, excuse me, to date has been extremely successful. A PhD candidate is doing historical research on Southern American churches for his dissertation. As part of his research, he is comparing the 2025 and 2030 versions of bulletins, newsletters, and websites of a wide variety of Christian churches. What differences does he see? And I guess below we have listed some of the things that were touched on. More leadership by people of color, less Eurocentric, bridges, evidence of bridges being built, images of Black people in the publications, not just on the last page, and without notation that they are Black. Not highlighting, calling attention to Black, but just we're all human. Restorative justice work around historical harms and current effects of those harms, including reparations, both monetary and structural. Real grappling with what the land heritage means for us. Anybody want to add anything to that list from our group?
Thank you all for that. That's an excellent list. And Margaret?
I have a question. I've asked this question recently, and I need somebody more knowledgeable and learned than I am in world history. But has a nation ever come into existence without oppressing somebody?
I would venture to say that is probably not a question we can answer on this call.
Yeah, well, okay.
But I think it's a beautiful question. I propose we kind of put a pin there so that Emily and I can think about, in addition to anyone else, but in terms of access to resources that we have and who might even be also faith aligned and be able to provide that perspective. We can think about that. And then if you all also have some ideas around some resources, I think it's a great question. I think that right now we're probably not in a place to do it justice, but we'll certainly note it down. I think find a way to come back around to that and see what
just like to, if there is, I would like to really study them.
But yes, so I think something like that is just really important to try to do that well. But what I wanted to point out before we'll take a quick break in just a moment, but just some things to share about your questions. So group 1 had a question where the timeline was in the very distant future and the perspective was an alien. And group 2 had a timeline that was 10 years from now, and the method or the perspective was a museum exhibit. And then group 3 had a timeline that was 5 years from now. What value or do you see or not see, or what reason might there be for the specific timelines you all were given as different groups in your brainstorming?
I'm thinking, I was in a group that had the long timeline.
Right.
And I found it challenging to think really long term, but it gives us an opportunity to think of I think to be more imaginative and to think of outcomes that just aren't even within the realm of possibility in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like she said that for our group one, we really were like the sky is the limit, but that led us to then discuss, well, what is the absolute end goal then? So it kind of derailed almost a little on the topic of that.
Mhm.
And is that really a derailing, right? I think that might be an excellent question. That's probably what you always want to be asking yourself when you're thinking about, investments of time, money, attention. It's an excellent question. So I would venture to say you all were on the perfect track once you started thinking about that. And Pamela, I think you had something you looked like you were going to say as well.
Well, I was just going to say that when you give these separate timelines the way that you did, I guess it sort of showed that we're the progress that it's something we always say at church, we're ever becoming. There's
Mm-hmm.
just always this process that we're going through to get better and better at trying to overcome this. A word that Becky used in our group was this harm that has existed in processing it and addressing it. And I just think that that's important.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, probably most of us were thinking about inside our own congregations. But it strikes me that in order for some of the things that we imagined for whatever time period in the future there is, the changes would have had to have gone beyond our congregation
Mm-hmm.
in order for them to be real. And isn't that really what we should all be aspiring to in the long run? Is that the work that we are doing here and that we do in and through our congregations really changes the communities that our churches are in, and changes them in ways that moves us towards justice and love and equity. Those things we imagined on that island we were talking about.
Absolutely. And really, we just wanted to kind of start that process of thinking and just emphasizing what you can imagine as realistic to be, what you would be observing in 5 years versus in 10 years versus at a very distant future, are different things, as you all said, because of the timeline allotted. And so we're just kind of practicing that, starting to think about our short, medium, and long term, starting to think about a vision. And I think the bigger thing is, and I think this comes to the question that Shelby's group brought up, is you can't achieve something if you don't know what you're trying to do. So this process of starting with a vision is helping us to start to think about what is it we're actually trying to do. When we think of this ideal vision of being at the end of very successful work, what does that actually look like? And by knowing that, it helps us to start to shape what we will start to do in the short and the medium term to get to that longer term vision.
One thing I'm really excited about is the partnerships that our church is emphasizing. And I think that I've seen this. I've only been a member of Wilshire for 5 years, but I am seeing partnerships is something that's going to be extremely important in moving our work forward in our current culture. And if we don't partner, we're not going to have the impact that we could have as Christians that really feel like the justice, love, and equity is significant. And our church partnered with, I believe, Abby and those Juliana, two other churches with the Guns to Gardens event last Sunday. I think there were several events going on last Sunday, but I was just struck by the unity there of the churches and doing something tangible to say, this is what we believe.
And that's actually a perfect place for us to pause. I'm going to send you all on your break because we'll have another group discussion when we come back. And I think that that was a very nice setup for that. So thank you, Margaret. So if you all will please come back at 20 after the hour. All right, welcome back, everyone. So shifting to our next topic to ponder. Let me grab, here we go. So we started kind of with that bigger view in general of what we'd like to see. And I'm going to bring us back to a topic that we've talked about before, the topic of narratives. And let me share my screen. And it'll be a brief recap of what we've talked about. Oops, there we go. So thinking about narratives, the word narrative has many definitions. That at its core, it's generally kind of a story, a description, but you can get specific about types of narratives, what molds them, what their purpose are. And so what we're talking about are kind of our social narratives, the narratives that we live, right? And the narratives that we're talking about are very much defined and controlled and impacted and influenced by power. So when we say narrative in this context and in the context of IDAT, we're talking about collections of stories and of messages and explanations about how the world operates. And each of these individual stories and messages, they're based on assumptions about who's important, what's normal, what's not normal, what's scary. And this kind of came up in you all's earlier discussion about making rules that once you make one, then you realize you have to make another, you have to start defining things. And so what's so important about the narratives that we're speaking of is the people who get to define these things and to make these decisions about who is important and what's important is what is all about the power dynamic in a particular society. And whoever's in power is who gets to choose what some of these stories are. And then, and that can fluctuate. The same people aren't necessarily always in power. And then there can be different degrees of other groups that are trying to get their definitions and their version of what's important and what matters to the forefront. So you end up with competing narratives. So in the sense that we're talking about, at any given moment, there is going to be some type of dominant narrative or narratives. And then there will be others that might be considered fringe or outside narratives. And what's dominant and what is fringe can fluctuate and change. But I wanted to kind of start this conversation with that framing. So that as we go into this next question, which has us thinking about narratives and specifically narratives that are out there around Christianity. And when we say narratives, again, we're talking about the stories and the messages and what people think and hear and what that means about what they think about Christianity. The narrative might not be what you feel Christianity truly is. But you might recognize that there are a lot of stories out there and messages that might give other people the impression that that's what it is, or that other people might be defining and telling stories about their Christianity differently. So that's the conversation that we're having. Any questions about that piece, just kind of as a framing moment? Okay. So with that thought in mind and that definition of narrative in mind, what we're going to do is go into our second great breakout groups. And what we're really thinking about here are each of you, again, will have a different question around narratives, stories, messages, collections, where they're coming from. So let me drop again the links into the chat and I'll tell each of you which groups you are in so you'll know which one to look at. So group one is Abby, Kathy Tamsberg, Juliana, Pamela, and Sean. Group 2, Becky, Chris, Margaret, Mary. Group 3, Shalise, Kathy Randalls, Lewis, and Rowan. So I want to give you all just a moment. If you need, anybody doesn't know their group or forgot it and needs me to repeat, just let me know. But give you about a minute to read it yourselves, and then I'll send you into your groups. And this breakout group will be a little bit shorter. And then we'll come out and share and wrap up for the evening. Coming to our last little piece.
Shauna, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
At least in ours, church is a capital C. Does that mean the church universal or our congregation?
I think it's both.
Okay.
So I think you all think about answers for both of those. Thank you for that question. I think that's a great question. All right, I'm going to send you to your groups now.
And now you're on the record.
That's right. Thanks for the music, Shauna. Always awesome. I'm waiting for my Zap Mama. I might not fit so much, but
Yes, I'm not sure who, but I think Caroline must have built that playlist, but it's
oh
cool.
yeah. Good ones in there.
Let's see. All right, everyone's popping on in. And we know there's never enough time to have the conversation that you want, but this is the beginning of a conversation. We'll continue this talking once you all get here. But we'll do the same thing. We'll briefly and just want to hear from each group your question. Again, you each had different questions, and then kind of a couple of the main things that came out of that. We'll compile all of this and share, because we would love when you all, as groups, as you're continuing to talk and plan for the work that you're doing and these projects that you've all been talking about, to have these things in mind. The idea is for this to kind of help you think about the projects that would help you feel like you're moving towards the things you want to see. And so I think, is everyone back with us? I think everyone's here. So group 1, we'll start with you. Someone share your question and just kind of briefly some of your core answers.
So I took notes. Our question was, what are the narratives about the church we are hearing that we no longer want to be told? And what is the church's role in stopping those narratives? Oh, wow, somebody's written in. Oh, that's wonderful.
Took notes too, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, Kathy pointed out this idea that we only like good people and our expectation is perfectionism. The expectation that the church is judgmental. You all see something in the way. Oh, here I am. Okay. White Christian nationalism, we'd like to get that out of the church. The proud narrative that we have about ourselves, that we're so progressive. We have this pride that we are so ahead of everyone else. That's something we really need to get rid of and not hear anymore. This self-congratulatory view of ourselves. The one true church was brought up too. That was another one. And the implication that we are better or superior kind of Baptist. So we're a different kind of Baptist. We're a better Baptist. And also the thought that we have all the answers to everything. We've got it all figured out because we're Christians. So.
Excellent, excellent. And see that yes, I won't make any commentary. Thank you for sharing that. We'll move a little quicker in this round because we had some good discussion earlier. So I'll ask group 2 to jump in and someone share your question and some highlights from some of the answers that you came up with.
Okay. The question was, what is the narrative of the church that we think should be told, but that we're not hearing? What is the church's role in advancing the telling of the narrative we want? So we started off with the narrative we need to hear and aren't hearing is that the church has been complicit with the subjugation of people of color and that we have a responsibility to address the harms that have occurred because of that. The narrative we don't want to hear and are hearing is the narrative of Christian nationalism. It is not one that we want to be heard or told. The narratives we want to hear are the narrative of Jesus, and while the church has fallen short, it has also stepped up. Also, the narrative we'd want to hear is the narrative of bringing God's kingdom on earth, love and inclusion versus a narrative of war, domination, and power, which is kind of on the Christian right. And then last of all, we talked about the narrative of the Jubilees.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Anybody want to add anything to that from our group?
Good job, Chris.
Great
Well,
job.
somebody took the notes. I don't know who that was in our group, but good note taking.
Shout out to all the note takers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we'll shift over to group 3 and kind of hear the question that brought it all together. Or the
Our question was, what does a truth-centered Christian narrative look like? What's the church's role in advancing such a narrative? So we talked about one that acknowledges a full history of Christianity and the ways that it has helped and harmed. Um, we said it was hard, kind of like maybe outside of a historical framework to try to figure out like what is truth in Christianity. Not a lot of like universal, Christian beliefs. We're all have different views. So it says, what about going back to the original language and the Bible was written in, especially the Gospels? And truth sits at the center of the circle of those who seek it. Those are our comments. We didn't really get to like what the church should be doing.
That is perfectly all right. We know it was a very abbreviated time. And really these groups tonight were to get these juices flowing. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to continue grappling with these, but to kind of paint the picture for you of where this all fits in and why we've been having you talk about this evening. These are the questions that we want to really dive more deeply into at the summit. And we'll be coming together using these kinds of questions. What are the narratives out there that we don't like, that we do not think are a true reflection of the Christian faith that need to be stopped? What are the narratives that need to be told, that are a true reflection of the values we hold and they're not being told? And what is the role of the church in advancing that and having a truth-centered narrative? And thinking about, with all of the important work that you all have been doing and the new work you're adding to build onto that, how it contributes to those things, stopping the stories, the bad narratives, emphasizing and telling the good narratives, and advancing a truth-centered narrative. And all of that starts with the idea that if each church is doing this individually with their own narrative and with the way that they engage with the world, the more churches you have doing it,
Right.
the more it's not a marginal fringe narrative, right? The more people are telling the story, that's how you start to become that dominant narrative and start to build that power. And so that's what we're looking to do as you all move into kind of the next phase and we look at how to support the work that you're doing. How do we support it in such a way that we're building momentum and we're making progress toward taking out those bad narratives, putting in the good ones, and becoming the dominant narrative. And especially both two groups mentioned specifically white Christian nationalism. And that's something that we are specifically thinking of. We didn't want to put that down because we didn't want to, taint the conversation, but it's true. That's the narrative that's taking over and pushing back against that. And so this last little brief segment that we have to kind of wrap up the night is as we think about this, so much of the work, and we've really been focused internally, but we've started this process of thinking about what the work has to look like outside. And Becky even brought up the point that in order to achieve some of these visions that you all have started thinking about, it's more than just doing the work in the church. And we thought, just kind of being aware and thinking about some of these narratives that are out there and what we're actually facing. So we pulled together a few clips. Some of you may have seen, but sometimes it's just, even though you're doing the work and you're in it, it's a reminder of what you're really kind of up against. So we share this not with the thought that you're responsible for changing any of these things, but to remember as we're thinking about the work that we want to do and as we kind of come together to think about our goals, kind of the situation we're in at the moment and the world we're living in. So just going to share a few of these and just have a moment to have reflections and have thoughts about them. So what we will see, I'm going to share my screen. I should have practiced this part. But I'm going to share it before, share my sound. Okay. And then I'll turn up my sound.
I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that were brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't have been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery and the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel, and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have black people in here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I was never a slave. It's like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old, you're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices, be content with whatever situation you were born into, and make the most of it. God's not limited to your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think. I'm sure.
Mercy.
So first of all, I'm sorry, I should have given a warning of exactly what I was about to share. I'm very sorry about that. I was talking too much and didn't realize I didn't say that.
Who was that guy?
I'll have to pull his name. I think his name was on the screen. I'll see if it was on the screen.
It was so small I couldn't read it.
The only reason I wanted to pull some things like this specifically because that is a pastor in a pulpit saying this. These aren't just random community members.
Saying to his congregation, to their faces.
But thinking about the power that holds, right? That's a different type of challenge. That when people are doing things that they have heard from someone that they see as a leader and someone that they may believe God has put here to guide them. And that's a very different type of work than when you're talking about someone who has other personal reasons that they might be believing something. So when we talk about narratives in the church and the collections of stories and messages and things that are creating a church narrative or a Christian narrative, these are not outsiders talking about things, right? This is coming from the people that are the leaders. So I'm going to stop for a moment and just kind of your thoughts when we think about the idea of this is what people are hearing when they go to get guidance from their spiritual leaders.
It's exactly the same narrative that justified slavery back in the 1500s and the domination of Europeans of the rest of the world, and everything that has come since then. It was the church that said precisely that: go out and evangelize and enslave people for the purpose. So let's own that, let's acknowledge that, and let's put
Does that bring up any thoughts when you think about the kind of work that individuals and individual churches can do?
Well, simply acknowledging that heritage and history, telling the truth about it and telling the truth now is one thing we can do about it.
There's a group of clergy in Dallas that have united, and it's a very loose coalition, meaning like it's open to everybody. And they're really being bold in speaking out against immigration and ICE policies, against Supreme Court rulings. And it's reassuring to see faith leaders being louder than the racist and nationalistic voices. And I hope that that will just spread.
This next one I'll share a different narrative. So this one's not specifically focused around race. So let me share again, and I'll go ahead and share that one.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies? That's it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
I'm here as a working journalist, and I'm a mom of 3.
Good for you.
Is that an issue?
No, and no, it's not automatically an issue.
Christ Church senior pastor Doug Wilson is the leader of a Christian nationalist movement that believes in a patriarchal society where men are dominant and women are expected to submit to their husbands. Josh and Amy Prince, along with their 4 kids, moved from Washington State to Moscow, Idaho, where Wilson's movement is based.
Do you see Amy as your equal?
Yes and no. In the sense that we're both saved by grace, we're absolutely on equal footing. But we have very different purposes, God-given.
But do you see yourself as the head of the household, as the man?
He is the head of our household. Yes, and I do submit to him.
So like moving here was ultimately your decision.
Yes.
That's a great
example.
Wilson says in his vision of a Christian society, women as individuals shouldn't be able to vote. His fellow pastors Jared Longshore and Toby Sumter agree.
In my ideal society, we would vote as households. And I would ordinarily be the one that would cast the vote, but I would cast the vote having discussed it with my household.
But what if your wife doesn't want to vote for the same person as you?
Right. Well, then that's a great opportunity for a good discussion.
There are some who have gone so far as to say that they want the 19th Amendment repealed.
I would support that. And I'd support it on the basis that the atomization that comes with our current system is not good for humans.
And Wilson, a veteran himself, is unapologetic about his view that women shouldn't be in certain leadership or combat roles.
Looking at the leadership page for Christ Church, it's all men. Do you accept women in leadership roles in the church and government?
In the church, no.
Why?
Because the Bible says not to.
well, that's not what happens in the Bible. Women do lead all the time.
Progressive faith leader Reverend Jennifer Butler is concerned about Wilson's growing influence.
He is rapidly gaining in power. He has hundreds of churches established around the country. They actually literally want to take over towns and cities, and they have access to this administration.
Wilson's highest level connection to the administration is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
It's not organizationally tied to us, but it's the kind of thing we love to see.
For his part, Hegseth has publicly praised Wilson.
Now we're standing on the shoulders of a generation later, the Doug Wilsons and the others.
Women are the kind of people that people come out.
My goodness.
And I know it's a lot. I'm sorry. It's not to dump a lot on you, but I feel like if we're in this work, it's important that we're really seeing what we're doing, that we not forget in the isolation of our Zoom room. Right?
Thank you, Shauna, for sharing that, because I'm not in those circles where I'm hearing that I mean, I know there are people out there that believe that, but it's very much going back to the 50s and 60s, it seems like. And I mean, I heard those views. I've heard those views even when I was in my 30s. I wasn't in a church that espoused them, but I heard them, and it's a wake-up call, of what we're up against, it seems like. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. I'm just shocked.
I think for us to really know what we're up against, we have to really understand the Christian nationalist movement and how it gained power, and specifically only a particular branch. It's the non-denominational, charismatic branch that has grown in power and moved from the fringe now into the White House and is behind all of this stuff that we're seeing. And the book that really explains all this and would help us understand better what we're up against and how to address it is the book we're actually going to read in our next book club at Pullman Church. It's called The Violent Take It by Force. And I would highly recommend reading that book to gain a deep understanding of what's happening with this whole particular branch of the Christian nationalist movement and how it has come about to gain so much power and influence.
So I guess I think that it's really important to understand what's really going on out there, but I think it's also really important not to give it more power by orienting to it, but rather to say, what's the alternative narrative that we want to put forward, and how do we convince people that this narrative is the one where truth lies and where freedom lies and where life lies. And let's not overly focus on them. Let's understand them so we know what's out there and what people are being led to think. But don't go down the rabbit hole of letting them suck us into their world. Let's create an alternate world that looks better to people and that people will stay with.
Thank you, Becky.
Comment I'd make would be, this isn't new. They've always been there. They've just got a bigger microphone right now. And that's where what we're up against. And time marches on. I mean, when we were listening to that first pastor, I'm sitting here thinking about, we had my wife did a musical here in Garland a year and a half ago, where it was mostly a Black young cast. And there were some scenes in it where it replayed what segregation was like in our community. And those kids couldn't believe it. They couldn't imagine what separate but equal meant when the children were not allowed, when their textbooks were the used textbooks from the white students who had marked them up and ripped them up, where they didn't even have sports equipment and they had to use a rock and a sock. to play baseball. You know, and the young generation just was like, golly, did this really happen?
Right.
Part of our challenge is to make sure that we don't lose our history here in a lot of this. And you know, I've known a lot of these guys out there who don't think women ought to have a role in the church, and they've got a microphone now.
Right.
And absolutely, and we'll be continuing the conversation. We'll get a chance to talk about a lot of this from all different angles. But we agree. I mean, the role here and the goal here is not trying to convince or change anyone's mind. It's simply starting to tell the story that you want to tell the way you want it to be told.
Right.
And as more churches, because there are already churches out there that want to tell,
Right.
right? So it's a matter of how do we do that effectively? What do we need to change about the current way we're telling our story so that it reflects the one we want? And then as more and more churches that want to tell that story do it, and as we can be a support to them in telling that, that voice grows. And it's like Becky said, it's not so much responding to and focusing on what we don't want, being aware of it, because you have to be aware of things. It's important to protect yourself. It's important to be knowledgeable. But I think, but more focusing on what we can do. And that's why this program has taken the approach of narrative change, not individual behavior. That's not what we're been trying to work toward here. That's why we're focusing on what do our timelines say? What do our bulletins say? What do our websites say? What are the messages we give? Which is a very different focus than saying, let's have a group meeting and try to convince parishioners to think something different, right? We just start acting in a new way, and over time, 90% of the church is acting that way, then eventually the people that want to act that way come to the church, and the people that don't want to leave and find another church that acts a different way.
I think that Reverend Barber's Poor People's Campaign, Repairs of the Breach, is a wonderful example of trying to create, you know, a different narrative that we would want to see more of, and try and do. How do we? I think he's wrestling with that. He's creating a narrative and trying to find ways to get it out there and spread it, and get people to see it as an alternative narrative.
I
want to make sure, I want to wrap us up because we're at 8 Central, 9
Mhm.
9 Eastern. And so thank you all again for spending tonight with us. And the things that we really want you all to take away from this is just kind of starting that process of thinking about what are we trying to achieve?
Right.
What does it look like? Because once we kind of start to know a little bit about what it looks like, then we can really think about what do we do to get there. And with that, I'll ask Abby, would you mind closing us out with prayer this evening?
Jonna, before she does that, may I ask, could you open a room for the St. Charles group to caucus, please?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'll open 3, so any churches that want to stay, please feel free. Thank you, Becky, for that.
Okay, let's pray. Good and gracious God, I thank you for these people and for this program, for the churches that are represented here. Help us to be a bold witness for a faith that is equitable and just. Help us to speak out against harm and to continue to grow and evolve in our learning and in our commitment to justice. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rooms are open for anyone who wants to